Epstein,
Great to be with you.
Epstein, Katy Yaroslavsky,
Hi.
and Sam Yebri.
Everyone.
Okay, so these will be our candidates. Our timer, your best friend today, will be Ingrid Van Eckert, our VP operations, and she'll be timing you. You get 2 minutes to open. 2 minutes opening, as I hope was all explained to you. 2 minutes opening, and then for your questions, there'll be 1.5 minutes to answer, and then you'll have a 1.5 minute closing. Mike will be your moderator. He will ask you the hard questions. Ingrid will alert you and your opening at the 1 minute. So you'll have 1 minute left, 30 seconds, and then thank you. And then on your 1.5 minutes, she will alert you at 30 seconds. And then at the end, thank you. So any questions there? No? Okay.
I'll do my best.
She'll do her best, right? I see right now, I see Mike Newhouse up in the field up there, who is running for CD11. And I see Chelsea Byers is there, who is, where is Chelsea, who is a candidate for West Hollywood City Council. And we'll be going along as we do. So Mike, can I turn it over to you now?
You certainly may. Let me start by giving a shout out to our former Los Angeles City Controller, Rick Tuttle, who I also see in the room. Great to always have Rick. Another ex-elected official who has stayed engaged intimately, and it's a bit of a role model for me. So thanks to all the candidates for participating. God bless you for jumping in and running for City Council, the toughest job you will ever love. Some days, and the toughest job some days you might be pulling your hair out about. We're gonna try to do 6 questions today. If we go through faster, I can do a little bit more. I'm gonna ask questions about homelessness, public safety, transportation, housing development, and the environment. And I'm going to try to be a little more specific and nuanced with the questions. I'm not just going to say, what are you going to do about homelessness? Because you've probably gotten that basic question 1,000 times. So I'm going to try to do a little bit more nuance and detail to sort of tease out how you're thinking. We're going to go in alphabetical order. So the opening statements, we will start with Molly, then go to Jimmy, and then for the questions and closing statements, we'll continue in that order, just sort of rotating in a circle. So and then if we have time, in addition to those topic questions, I will try to squeeze in a question that tries to tease out a little bit of personal information about you that would be of use to the voters. So with that, let's go right to the opening statements, and we'll begin with Molly.
Hi there. Thank you so much, Mike. And thank you, Cara, and all of the West LA Dem Club members and board members. And I feel really excited to be here. You know, West LA Dems was my first Dem Club that I joined and became active with the Democratic Party to make changes. That was about 6 years ago. I'm born and raised in Los Angeles. I've lived in District 5 for 20 years. I have seen and are witnessing, as we all are, the demise of our beautiful city. And, you know, I'm jumping in, getting involved. I've been involved in the grassroots. I'm a community organizer. I'm a climate leader trained by Al Gore. I'm a small business owner, environmentalist, activist. So I've been doing work within the community for about 6 years, and decided to have a bigger platform. Pardon me?
1 second, that was.
One minute.
1 minute, rather.
Oh, okay, thanks, Ingrid. So I really want to be a public servant to the people and be a voice, be an example, and serve the people, not the political machine. As Mike was talking about, you know, I'm a real progressive. I'm for the people, for the democracy, and I'm not here to side with special interests. I'm not taking any special interest money. I'm grassroots, people powered, And I am an environmentalist for sacred space, for people, planet, and the animals, that we all are here together. And I want to also, I walk the walk. I don't just talk the talk. So it's really important that we now get leaders who walk the walk and not just talk the talk, because it's easy to, we say a lot of things, and what are we doing?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mike, you're muted.
I was muted. There we go. Next up is Jimmy.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. And thank you, Councilmember Bonin. You're really one of my heroes. My name is Jimmy Biblarz. I'm very excited to be running in Council District 5, my home territory. A little bit about my backstory. I grew up in the Pico Robertson neighborhood. I like to say 1 block south of Synagogue Row off of Pico, in a small duplex apartment on Cardiff Avenue. And I came of age in the heyday of mid-2000s homophobia. And for a young queer kid, it was a brutal time. It didn't always feel like the long arc of history would bend toward justice on gay rights. And in the midst of that period, I had a real early childhood confrontation with inequality. My family was evicted from our half of the duplex, and out-of-state landlord wanted to tear the 2-unit duplex down and build a single-family McMansion. And the lot ended up sitting vacant for 6 years, so the project never even came to fruition. And in the aftermath of the eviction, my family was chased around the city by housing affordability, and both my parents struggled very, very seriously with substance use in the aftermath, and luckily have both been in long-term recovery. But the combination of coming of age amid this incredibly powerful civil rights movement and this confrontation with eviction and housing really showed me that politics matters for my life and for my community. And I've been working in politics and inequality ever since. I was at Harvard for college and graduate school and law school, and I now teach at UCLA Law School. And my academic portfolio was all about the rise of income and wealth inequality, and in particular, how it intersects with housing. When my partner and I moved back a few years ago, we were painfully struck by the homeless and housing crisis, as we all are. I'm not one to knock public servants. It's a lot easier to get up here and criticize than to actually be in the trenches. But I saw a city and a state that were failing to grapple with the magnitude of this problem, where you have seen real wages stagnate for 60 years and the cost of housing go up 11 times. And that gulf between the cost of housing and real wages being responsible for so much of the poverty that we see and so much of the homelessness that we see. And then when you have that homelessness, this incredibly short-termist approach to the crisis, I'm running to make Los Angeles a place where everybody can afford to thrive. We have an incredibly exciting campaign, and I'm very happy to be talking to you today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Next is Scott.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be with West LA Democratic Club and Councilmember Bonin, who I have enormous respect for. I'm running for City Council to make LA work for all of us. And I will bring leadership to City Hall that is grounded in community, guided by compassion, and focused on results. I'm a trained public policy analyst and have worked professionally as a social science researcher and a public health worker at the Rand Corporation in UCLA. And I'm also a seasoned community leader. I was the chair of the Mid-City West Neighborhood Council for 7 years and founded the Midtown Los Angeles Homeless Coalition to connect unhoused neighbors to services and housing in the Midtown region. My family rents in Cortez Square. My priorities are making LA affordable for all, ending homelessness by connecting folks with services and housing they need, and taking local action on climate change, including building a multimodal 21st century transportation system for our city. These issues are deeply personal to me. I've lived in poorly maintained housing with little power to compel landlords to make necessary repairs. As an Angelino who commutes by bike and bus and walks my daughter to school, I understand how dangerous our streets are and how difficult it is to get around this city without a car. I'm running to take bold action on these issues, and I have the skills in policy analysis, community engagement, and coalition building to get the job done. As chair of Mid-City West, I leveraged a shoestring budget to bring millions of dollars into the community for safer streets. And as founder of the Midtown Los Angeles Homeless Coalition, I created the space that led to the only bridge home shelter in CD5. Now I'm bringing that can-do energy to this movement for change in CD5, and I hope you'll join me. Thanks so much.
Great.
Thank you.
Katy? You're on mute.
Muted, Katy.
So I am.
Yeah.
Good morning. I'm an environmental attorney, a policymaker at the county, and a mom to 3 young kids. I'm running because I'm deeply frustrated at the state of our city. This is my hometown, and I want our neighborhoods to be places where we can all thrive. But they don't feel like those places right now. And the gulf between where we are and where we need to be is bridged by electing effective, ethical, and proven leadership into those seats of power. I spent a decade in the private sector as a land use attorney and as the general counsel of a climate change nonprofit. And for the last 6 years, I've enacted policy and programs on behalf of LA County's 10 million people while working for LA County Supervisor Sheila Kuehl as a senior policy advisor. I've seen firsthand how much good government can do when working in partnership with communities. I took the lead on creating LA County's first sustainability office and spent 3 years leading the development, negotiation, and adoption by voters of one of our region's largest jobs and infrastructure measures, Measure W. It's become a national model for how to build equitable green infrastructure. I'm a coalition builder who knows how to use the tools of government to make meaningful change, and my priorities on the council are: one, to address the root causes of homelessness and poverty, and to create more flexible and affordable housing to get folks off the street quickly and connected to housing and services; two, to make our communities safer and healthier by investing in them for the long term; and three, to transform LA into a climate resilient and environmentally just city. These problems are big and complicated, but I have a proven track record of creating coalitions and problem solving. I'll come into the job clear-eyed about the challenges and how best to navigate bureaucracies and problem solve. It's why I have the support of a broad cross-section of folks, from elected officials like Congresswoman Bass and State Senators Kamlager and Allen, Assembly members Bryan and Friedman, my boss, Supervisor Kuehl, Rick Tuttle, thank you, Rick, and hundreds of community, environmental, business, and nonprofit leaders and unions like Unite Here, Local 11, and SEIU 721. I look forward to partnering with you to make our communities into the places we know they need to become. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. And Sam.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sam Yebri, and it's a pleasure to be with you and see so many friends. Cara, thank you for organizing this. And to Councilmember Bonin, I want to start off by acknowledging and thanking you for your service, for your authenticity. And even though we might disagree on some policy, including Ordinance 4118, which I hope we can dig into its merits substantively today, I do respect you and appreciate the contributions you've made to this great city. And I pray that the support of your family and friends will help you overcome some of the issues you've shared so publicly and bravely. My story is really the story of so many Angelenos. My parents and I arrived in Los Angeles when I was a year old as refugees from Iran, nothing more than a few suitcases. And one of my life's great blessings, not only that America opened its doors to immigrants from the Middle East, but that I was able to find an affordable place to live. My parents were able to 40 years ago. And I know that today that's even harder than ever. 3 great public schools in the 5th District launched me to Yale, where I got my first taste of politics, working for Bill Bradley for president of New Hampshire in the snow in '99, and eventually working for Congressman Waxman. And when I came back to Los Angeles after law school at USC, decided to commit myself to making Los Angeles a better place by fighting for folks who are most vulnerable. On behalf of tenants and workers. Professionally, I fight for employees every day as a plaintiff side employment lawyer, but I serve on the boards of Bethesda Legal Services and EDA, which builds housing for adults with special needs, the Friends of the Westwood Library, the Anti-Defamation League, as a city commissioner under Mayor Villaraigosa on a gun violence prevention task force under City Attorney Fewer, and engaging new Americans in civic life as part of an organization that I started. But meanwhile, my wife and I have watched with our 4 kids as our city is dealing with major issues, explosion of poverty and homelessness and public safety and corruption. And we need new leaders, not the same approaches from career politicians. It's time for us to elect people that are really ready to roll up their sleeves to tackle the problems with urgency. And I'm so proud to have a broad coalition supporting us. Progressive leaders like Holly Mitchell, Nanette Berrigan, moderates like Joe Buscaino and Curran Price, Henry Waxman, labor, the painters, AFSCME, business groups, BizFed, the Hollywood.
Thank you.
And be honored to work with you today and look forward to our conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you to all the candidates for the opening statements. We're going to go to questions now. The format that the club has given me is that each candidate will be given 90 seconds to answer a question. God bless you. I can't introduce myself in 90 seconds. I need 12 minutes minimum. So I wish you all luck in this. The first 2 questions, because it's the biggest issue in LA, are about homelessness. The first question, we start going in the rotating alphabetical order with Jimmy. And I'll note that both of the questions about homelessness come sort of from the frame to the issue politically that is coming from the overarching campaign for mayor. So here's question number 1. And again, we're starting with Jimmy. There's a growing dispute about how to spend money to address homelessness. Many people say that the city should focus on housing with supportive services with the goal of people being housed permanently. Others are contending that that's too slow and costly, and the goal should be getting people off the streets quickly and safely by providing shelter beds. I imagine most of you are going to say we should do both, but I'd like to hear from you on how much you think we should be focusing on housing versus how much we should be focusing on shelter, and how you would emphasize the use of funds. We'll start with Jimmy.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for the question. The thing about interim solutions is they sound good, they sound quick, they sound cheap, and they almost never have staying power because we lose our gumption for them just about as quickly as we get people into tiny homes and into shelter beds. Unhoused folks have been bandied about between shelters, in and out of project room key rooms, offered short-term solutions. It's why there has been such a complete and utter deterioration of trust between unhoused folks and government. What I'm about is permanent solutions that you can get online quickly, immediately, and more cost effectively than anything that we're currently doing. First, getting HHH, permanent supportive housing units, online much more quickly, being much more judicious and following some of Ron Galperin's recommendations for modular construction and approving adaptive reuse projects for HHAs. Second, investing in real, trained, multidisciplinary social work teams that are day in and day out, working with our most chronically unhoused, like the Encampment to Home program and the projects in Council District 4. Those are the only places that have seen real permanent housing for the chronically unhoused. It's the model that Houston and other cities that have made real inroads with that population have seen. And lastly, for the more newly homeless, so the folks that are on the losing end of an eviction or a bad divorce or job loss, it's about money. $1,000 can get people back on their feet and into the private housing market. So I reject the idea that interim solutions can't be permanent solutions. It's about making permanent solutions quickly implemented. And if there has to be permanent solutions, tying them to a permanent solution at the outset.
Thank you.
Next response is from Scott.
Thank you for the question, Mike. So I am a believer that we need to do both. In terms of permanent supportive housing, we have only 2 projects coming along the line in CD5. I mean, that's ridiculous. One of them is in Mid-City West, and my council voted unanimously for it and helped build the political will. There's one in West LA. There has not been the muscular leadership from Councilmember Koretz to get these projects going. We need to get more in the pipeline, and they need to be cheaper. I mean, it's a shame that, part of the reason why we're not building as fast as we can is politics, with folks like John Lee who are rejecting projects, and time is money on these projects. So we need political will and leadership to champion these projects. I believe we also need temporary arrangements because unfortunately that permanent supportive housing is not going to come fast enough to get people stabilized. But that needs to be in a non-congregate fashion. So I'm not a fan of congregate shelter, but I think things like safe camping, safe parking, tiny home villages can be cheap solutions to help stabilize our unhoused neighbors quickly. I support it, and I will apply the muscular leadership on the ground to cite those solutions in every part of CD5.
Great. Next is Katy.
Thank you.
Thank you. So like you alluded to, Councilman Bonin, we need to be, like you said, doing both, but we also need to be investing in prevention to slow the rate at which people are falling in, because right now we can't begin to get our arms around the problem while more people every day are becoming unhoused than we're getting off the streets. And so it's really important to focus more resources upstream, connecting people to resources while they still have a roof over their head. It's a lot more compassionate, it's a lot more cost effective to connect with people while they're still housed. And so I'm going to focus I would like to focus a huge percentage of our resources on prevention. We can also create more permanent solutions, as Jimmy mentioned, for less by adaptively reusing existing buildings, working with the state to loosen restrictions. It's really hard right now to adaptively reuse buildings because there's so many requirements around unhoused, homeless housing and affordable housing. We should be deploying things like rent subsidies to free up existing otherwise market rate housing. We can get people off the streets faster by simply giving people vouchers and helping people meet the delta between what they can afford and what the market's bearing right now. Like Scott said, we also need more interim solutions that flexible, safe, meets people's needs. Each person on the street is there for a variety of different reasons, and they have a bunch of different barriers that will prevent them from going into what the housing is that's available. So making sure we have enough flexible housing options that work for people. We simply don't have enough interim solutions. And so we need to be doing all 3 of those things. And then obviously we need better coordination between the county and the city and across the 15 council districts. But my guess is that that's going to be the next question around homelessness.
Thank you.
Thanks, Katy. Sam.
As you acknowledge, council member, this is not a binary choice. It's not either or. It's how do we allocate our resources in a way, in my view, with the goal of saving lives. And I began my candidacy by going to homeless shelters in the 5th district, including Hope of the Valley and Westwood Transitional Village and Path, and asking about what's working and what's not. And what I was told, and what I often share, is what Ken Kraft told me from Hope of the Valley. He said our current approach to homelessness is like allowing someone who's dying from hypothermia to sit in the cold while you build a brand new hospital. No, we all know that we'll bring that person in, wrap them in something warm, and make sure we save their lives. And we will not, I refuse to allow 5 people to continue to die in the streets of Los Angeles every single day. So if that means more focus on interim solutions so we can help people out of the streets and out of encampments indoors while we build the supportive and the workforce and the affordable housing, that's, I think, where we need to focus right now. We can do both. And it's like some of the ideas that were shared here. We have to spend more money on prevention. The best ROI of our tax dollars is to prevent someone from falling into homelessness. It's far more
30.
it's far cheaper to help someone at that stage before they fall into, and I support a right to counsel. So if you're a low-income tenant facing eviction, you have someone fighting for you against perhaps a landlord who might be unscrupulous. And I've done that work with Bethesda Legal Services over the years. And the key issue here also is workforce housing. We're not doing enough for that missing middle, for people who make more than $30,000 or $40,000 a year to be able to afford in the west side, to live in the west side of Los Angeles. Our teachers and our folks in the nonprofit world, we have to do more to build this housing, and transit is this huge opportunity with 7 stations coming to.
Thank you.
I'm going to interrupt for just a minute. Jimmy Biblarz, you had dropped out for a moment, but I've admitted you again, but I need to put you up on the spotlight. Can you speak for a moment so I can find you and spotlight you?
I'm here. I'll take a spotlight.
Okay. There you go.
Thanks, Michelle.
Okay, final answer on question 1 is Molly.
Hi, thank you. You know, we've been talking about this issue for years in LA. And homelessness, affordable housing, getting our brothers and sisters off the street. And instead of it getting better, it's gotten worse. So what is the real systemic issue? What is the systemic problem that is happening within our city? We can keep throwing money at it. We have HHH, we do all these things and nothing gets better, it gets worse. That's really what needs to be looked at. And until I'm elected, I can't really look into those intricate issues but I believe a lot of it has to do with special interests. And Scott mentioned John Lee, that we don't have a unified council and we have council people who vote against things. We also have developer money flowing, massively throughout. And that has all got to stop. We've got to
30.
come together for the greater good. So I believe in permanent housing. I also think we have mentally ill. We have families and we have addicted. They are variables that need different focuses. We need to reopen our mental facilities that were closed years ago. Now, I don't know, but we have the money, we just don't have the will. Nobody talks about that. Getting the drug and alcoholics sobered up and getting them jobs.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, that was question 1. And I gotta say, I am impressed by how well all of the candidates managed to squeeze an entire homelessness platform into 90 seconds. Wish I had learned to do the same. Question number 2 is also about homelessness. And we're starting with Jimmy on this one. Am I right? Correct me if I'm wrong. Yes, we're going with Jimmy on this one. There are some people on the city council, and there are some people running for mayor who argue that one of the biggest problems with homelessness in Los Angeles is that the city is too permissive and does not rely heavily enough upon enforcement, and that we've made it too easy for people to live on the streets. They argue that people have too little incentive to accept shelter, and that's why we have so many encampments. They want to compel people to accept shelter. A lot of pushback to that. Curious if it's something you agree with or disagree with, and why.
Absolutely. So short answer, no, that's not a view that I hold about the causes of our street encampments. People want housing. Talking about 4118 in particular, the ordinance that allows city councilors more power to designate zones as no camping zones. The ordinance represents everything wrong with our city's approach to homelessness. It misdiagnoses the problem, it's legally shaky, and it does nothing to get people into permanent housing. The Ninth Circuit has already indicated that ordinances like this are susceptible to constitutional challenge. They'll tell you that this ordinance only allows people to be moved if they refuse services. It's a myth. Talk to any unhoused person, talk to any homeless service provider, ask them what they are being guaranteed before 4118 sweep. At best, it's a few nights in a congregate shelter, maybe not even that, some short-term housing voucher or 2 people crammed into a tiny home. And usually it's not even that, let alone an offer of anything permanent. We need to build
30.
trust. We need ongoing, real permanent services for somebody who's been unhoused going on multiple years. It's completely understandable that it would be difficult for them to accept housing, and they need to build a trusted relationship with a credible messenger before they want to follow a government agent into a housing situation when they've been burned so many times by overpromises and under-delivers of services or the robustness of services. So ultimately, I think that is a vast misdiagnosis of the problem, and I hope that does not characterize our race.
Thank you.
Okay, and my apologies to the candidates. I did screw up. I should have started that question with Scott. And so the next question we will, because I want to be rotating and have a different person answering first. My apologies to all of you on that. So let's go to Scott right now for his answer to this one.
That's quite all right. So I do not believe that a lack of an enforcement approach is what is keeping us from solving our homeless crisis. Quite the opposite. So, and my campaign has been firmly opposed to 4118 because it will just move encampments from one block to another. And for voters, this is an important distinction. So Jimmy and I have been very clear in our opposition to this ordinance. Sam is championing it. He just boasted the other day about being, a strong supporter of 4118. Katy has been given multiple opportunities to say that she opposes it and has declined every single time. So this is an important differentiator. Look, dealing with our unhoused neighbors, they have all sorts of issues, and it is a labor-intensive process to get folks the help they need often, right? That's why we need to be funding aggressive outreach and mental health capacity to connect folks to the services and housing they need, right? What's not going to help is giving them a citation. What's not going to help is a vicious sweep that makes the work of our service providers so much harder because then they can't find our unhoused neighbors and continue to build the relationships that are so important to this work. Sam just said the other day that he thinks service providers support 4118. It's absurd. They're appalled by it. It makes their work much, much harder. Thank you very much.
Katy.
So we're going to solve homelessness by undertaking this work in a holistic, nuanced way where we focus on all sorts of different buckets of work like prevention, flexible housing, better coordination. Section 4118, to my mind, is a political red herring. It's used by political opportunists to make it seem like they're making tough but important decisions. It's not going to solve homelessness. Moving people from one side of the walk to the other doesn't fix anything. It just traumatizes people who are already undergoing significant trauma. I'd much rather be talking about real solutions like prevention, alleviating poverty more broadly, the things we were just talking about in the last answer, right? We can do this work without punishing people who are living on our streets. When we do offer folks real options paired with deep engagement, street engagement, and social work, we shouldn't have to force people anywhere. They will gladly accept it. Especially if the housing options that we're offering fit their needs. That being said, if it's paired with deep social work and street engagement, it could be a helpful tool. But if we're doing street engagement well and providing realistic housing options for folks, we shouldn't need 4118. And so I'm committed to doing that work of getting people to come in voluntarily on their own by providing real meaningful options for people and pairing it with services.
Thank you.
Okay, Sam.
Not sure exactly what Katy's position is on 4118, frankly, after that answer, which is different from prior answers. But I've been clear, Scott and Jimmy have been clear, as has Molly, on our positions. I think CD5 voters deserve to understand where their candidates are on this important issue. In terms of 4118, we cannot arrest our way out of homelessness. The prior iteration of this ordinance years ago, council member, basically arrested folks who are unhoused, and city attorneys had to deal with this issue of how we bring people off the streets into housing, and it was not an effective tool. But the current version of 4118, I do support, and I'll explain why. It is part of a broader strategy coupled with street services, coupled with a credible offer of shelter that will help people who are suffering on our streets onto the path of interim and permanent solutions. We all know that the solution forward requires housing and services. We need to build more affordable workforce, permanent supportive housing, and we need more interim housing solutions. But every single day, 5 people are dying on our streets. That's not progressive. That's not compassionate. We need to do everything we can
30.
to help people move out of these sensitive places like our parks and next to our schools and outside people's homes, which are some of the areas that 4118 addresses. This is part of a broader solution. We have to do everything we can. We can't continue to allow our neighbors who are on the streets suffering to continue to suffer. And I think 4118 is part of a broader street engagement solutions. When coupled, will effectively help people on the path back to permanent housing.
Thank you.
Molly?
Hi there. Okay, so yes, I do not support 4118. I believe it's just a Band-Aid, on a massive wound. It will just gridlock the courts. I mean, if you're giving citations to people who are, living on the streets, they don't have the money to pay. I mean, or moving them to one side of the street to the other, whatever. We need to house these people. We need to get into action, and affordable housing needs to be built. We keep, like, as I've said before, we keep throwing money at this issue and nothing seems to get done. So I think also we need to, as I said in the last, we need to open up, I don't know yet what that looks like, but mental facilities where people, and we have the populations, the drug addicted, the alcohol, the mentally ill, the families, the single mother that's on the street. And those have to be taken care of in different ways.
30.
So, that has to be looked at, and we can't just keep throwing money at this issue, and we have our brothers and sisters dying, living on the streets. It's also a public health crisis, and so I am, no more. We don't outlaw, we don't make the homeless, our brothers and sisters who are going through hard times, we don't make them criminals. We gather them in, we treat them compassionately, but also we do need tougher
Thank you.
ways, especially the mentally ill, to get off the street. Thank you.
Okay, third question. We will start with Scott. And this question is about public safety. Los Angeles is spending more money on LAPD this year than ever before, 1.76 billion. But there is a lot of concern being voiced in neighborhoods in Council District 5 about crime. Councilmember Corretz has used some of his discretionary money to add additional LAPD resources. Do you think, as we start heading into another budget season, that the city needs to give LAPD more money and resources, or that we need to be focusing on different ways to address crime?
Thank you for the question. So I do not think we need to be increasing LAPD's budget. When you look across different cities, we are spending way more money than peer cities, which are much safer. So there are very real issues of crime, including a troubling rise in violent crime as well as hate crimes. We need smarter, leaner policing. We need to get away from militarization, fewer helicopters, and more Kanbans in neighborhoods. And we need to also be reallocating funds to address the root causes of problems. So, for example, on homelessness, we had a murder in Beverly Grove that was perpetrated, unfortunately, by one of our unhoused folks who was having a mental health episode. Cops showed up very quickly, couldn't do anything, not in their skill set. It took a long time for mental health response to come, and it was too late at that point. We need to be doing smart reallocation of resources away from policing to professionals whose salaries are actually cheaper and are prepared to do the job. So I'm committed to that. We need smarter, leaner policing, and a more comprehensive approach to public safety than we're seeing right now in our city.
Thank you.
Katie.
So, sorry, one second. I've lost myself here. Look, I think we need to be making our communities more safe by doing two things at once. Well, one, we need to focus on LAPD, do an audit, see where officers are working right now, not out on the streets, not solving crimes, not doing active police work. We have officers doing desk duty. We have officers responding to homeless calls. We have officers responding to mental health calls. We should be shifting that work away towards sworn officers and towards civilians to free up officers to be out doing the work that they went to the academy to do in the first place. At the same time, we need to be investing in communities, right? We need to be creating job training programs, pipelines into good paying careers. We need to break the sort of the prison complex where people cycle in and out. That's how we make our communities more safe for the long haul. But before I say that we need to hire more officers, I think we should really do a deep dive in partnership with the mayor and the city council to figure out how we optimize what we already have. We may need more officers. It doesn't make sense to have officers working double shifts, moving from one part of the city to another. We make communities safer by having the same officers doing the same beats day in and day out. And so I want to make sure we're freeing up officers to do that work and moving them away from work that's better handled by social workers and mental health professionals.
Thank you.
Sam?
Okay, I'm gonna interrupt again. Scott Epstein, where are you? Speak.
Yeah, I'm here. Sorry, I had to change devices. I'm right here.
Okay, there you go.
Got him? Okay. Sam, go ahead.
And it's Epstein out of respect.
Sorry.
As someone whose last name is often butchered, I'm sensitive to that. So this is a really important issue, council member. I hear it every day now in the streets of the 5th District as I knock on doors. Regardless of background and where you live in the 5th District, people feel really unsafe, and especially in the Wilshire Division, which covers the Melrose and Beverly Grove, Hancock Park, Miracle Mile areas. There's historically been 1 homicide a year for the last several years. There were 13 last year. And I went to every vigil, Jerry and Bradford on Melrose. I went to Gabe Denies. I went to Brianna Cooper's just last month, and people want solutions here. And I think we can do both. We can both improve how our city's policed and root out police bias and police violence and hold police officers accountable and make sure the right people become police officers and make sure we train them the better way and keep neighborhoods safe, right? And the Councilmember Kretz's approach of investing in police overtime is a Band-Aid. It helps people feel safe in the short term, but it's not a long-term solution. And it's not, but the budget is part of it, but it's also how we spend our money. And I think the Congresswoman Bass and others, Mike Fuhrer, have indicated that we should go up to 9,700 or perhaps 10,000. That should be, I do
30.
think increase the number of police officers. But what we really have to do is restructure the responsibilities. They're not social workers. They're not first responders to every phone call. 140,000 phone calls related to homelessness go to them every year. We got to have them focus on the guns and the gangs that are exploding and have mental health professionals do with the 5150 hold issues. And that will keep us safer. And it's not a binary choice. We can do both. We can improve how policing is done and keep neighborhoods safe.
Thank you.
Molly?
Yes. Once again, which I bring up, what is the systemic issue of the rise in crime? I mean, part of it is the pandemic, but once again, what are we doing in the city? The crime is up, more homelessness. A lot of this is mentally ill, people acting out. That those 2 people who were stabbed over here on Orange, the woman down here on La Brea. I mean, it's just, it's like the Wild West out here. And I just think too, we have to look once again at the systemic and our educational system. No one brings up that. Our school system needs to be up and modernized and get a lot of these people who are out there who are, struggling to get them educated and get them good jobs and get a minimum wage that they can live on. It's absolutely ludicrous that we live in, in the city, one of the wealthiest, that we're not doing real progressive action. And that is our school system educating people. And then in our neighborhoods, I think going back to neighborhood watches, having town halls, getting to know the police that are in our neighborhoods and gathering people so we feel safe as a community together. and we actually become neighborhoods and communities again.
Birdie,
I don't believe in increasing the police force. I don't believe in defunding either. I think we need to work with what we have and work with, as I said, community, and look at systemic issues and get at those and create a just, equitable city for all neighborhoods, so we don't have people who have to struggle and go out and steal and create havoc for others because their family needs food. They need to be trained and have jobs and educated.
thank you.
Jimmy.
The most important job of any elected official is to keep people safe and ensure that they feel safe. And those aren't always the same thing, but they are the single most important job of anyone who wants this job. I'm an academic by training. Follow the research. Look at places that have seen real reductions in urban violence and do that. For my money, two things have been shown most robustly to show real reductions in violent crime. One, Operation Ceasefire out of Boston and CUNY, bringing together credible messengers, police, those prone to violence, and community leaders for ongoing, sustained, and consistent conversations. We did that in LA in the 2000s with Father Boyle and Homeboy Industries, and then we stopped once crime went down. That was the single gravest mistake we made because it set things up for an uptick in violence. We also, the second piece, is the creation of an Office of Neighborhood Safety. Richmond, California had the highest murder rate in the state and saw an 80% reduction by redirecting police resources from areas that they have no business being in, mental health, homeless services, to reduce the risk of police violence in interactions toward an equally empowered civilian office that was able to coordinate those services. I say this every time I get asked this question. We cannot allow discussions of public safety to
30.
crowd out conversations about police violence. We're Democrats. We believe in racial justice. We know that policing is more dangerous for some than for others, and that we need to be working in our conversations about public safety to continue to be centering the voices of people of color and those who are most vulnerable to police brutality.
Thank you.
Great. Okay, thank you, everybody. I really, really wish we had time to do follow-up questions. Each of these things could be like a half-hour discussion, but we do need to move on to the next question, which we start with Katy on this one. This is a question about transportation. One of the biggest and one of the most transformative transit projects on the horizon is the Sepulveda Transit Corridor, which would link the San Fernando Valley to the west side and eventually to LAX. Many people, I think most, really want this rail to connect to UCLA. I'd like the candidates to tell me, do you support an on-campus subway station, even if it means tunneling under parts of the district that object to it?
Yeah, we absolutely need a station that stops at UCLA. That's where people want to go. We need a transportation system that gets people where they want to go quickly, efficiently, safely, affordably. And UCLA is one of the great job centers on the west side of our region, right? And so having a station on campus is absolutely critically important. And I'm looking forward to seeing what the environmental review analysis says about the best way to get us there on the quickest timeline possible, but also efficiently and sort of working with the other system. You know, the whole system needs to be part and parcel of the larger system. So yes.
Sam.
Yeah, it's an important question. So I do support a station at UCLA for a lot of reasons. I grew up near campus, so I know it well. Every day, 100,000 cars drive through Westwood Village into UCLA every single day. And it's imperative that we build a station on campus that connects to the Purple Line. Some estimates indicate that if done properly, it could be the second busiest transit stop outside of downtown in Los Angeles. And we have to do it right with first and last mile and bike lanes and build housing nearby. But if you think about what UCLA is, it's the second biggest job center in LA County. It's one of the leading hospitals in the entire state. Obviously students, recreational, it's imperative that there be a stop on campus. There's 6 proposals right now that are out there. I hope that there's a full environmental review and hopefully there's some more ideas out there as well. But I support unequivocally a stop on the UCLA station campus.
Thank you.
Molly?
Yes, I support that. I just would have to also, I mean, I'm a little hesitant in the sense of the environmental impact of tunneling. and what that means to the environment. It's very important that, we are in a climate emergency, and it's not going to be pretty in a few years unless we really change our ways. And so I would have to say that I have to see the environmental impact on that, but I support all clean, better ways to transport through the city. I believe in making public transportation free. And also I'm a big bike rider. I bike as much as I can. And I would like to see, bike lanes, safe bike lanes. There's fantastic opportunity all up through Wilshire, into Wilshire corridor, along Century City to create a safe, buffered bike lane. So people, I think the safer we make bike riding, the more people will be apt to do it. We also need to get our leaders, taking public transportation, bike riding, because the leaders lead and people see that and will follow that. So it's not the actions we take. I mean, it's not the speeches we make, but the actions we take. So yes, I support that, but would have to see the environmental impact. But I think there's other ways to get to UCLA if the environmental impact is a hazard. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jimmy.
Absolutely. I teach at UCLA and would be eager to take this line. If we're not talking about housing and transportation as part and parcel of environmentalism in Los Angeles, we're just rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. And I know that my competitors, I often use an iceberg analogy, sorry to be a little on the nose with the continuing with the iceberg, but housing and transportation are the single greatest contributors to carbon emissions in Los Angeles. We need to do everything we can to get single occupancy vehicles off the road in Los Angeles from an environmental justice perspective and from a socioeconomic justice perspective. The only way that we will stave off environmental catastrophe and make this an affordable city, reversing the tide of income and wealth inequality, is real reimagination of our urban form. And that is a wonderful opportunity to think about how fantastic our streets can look with an integrated bike, bus, and heavy rail infrastructure, with mixed use housing that allows more people to live in the occupational centers of CD5 like Cedars-Sinai and UCLA. That's the kind of city that we need to be moving toward to protect us from climate change, and so that Council District 5 becomes a place that is an engine of social mobility so that more people can access the opportunities here. That starts with transit. It runs, again, not to be too on the nose, it runs right to the UCLA bus stop, transit stop.
Scott.
So yes, absolutely. I've been a staff member at UCLA for 10 years. We desperately need a stop at UCLA, which is one of the largest job centers in the county, as well as the home of tens of thousands of transit-reliant students, many of whom don't own cars. I think it's a measure of how backwards our transportation discourse is in this city that we were even considering an alternative that would stop right on the highway and subject transit riders, disproportionately Black and brown and lower income, to the noise and air pollution that is present there. Look, we need transit to go where people are, and we have to stop making terrible mistakes like putting rail alignments in the middle of highways. That's not where people are, and it's a social injustice. And then we also have to connect our transit to where people live by first mile, last mile solutions. Transportation is one of my biggest passions, and I've had enormous success in Mid-City West. We brought $2.3 million into the community for neighborhood greenways connecting to the Purple Line and the Red Line. It's the first time a neighborhood council has ever done it. We did it by visioning in a positive way, and that's what I'm going to do as the C5 council member. Thank you, Ingrid.
Thank you. A few of you have mentioned housing, so we will talk about housing for our next question, and we begin with Sam on this one. Like Council District 11, which I represent, Council District 5 is rich in resources, in services, in amenities for its constituents. It's considerably wealthier than other parts of the city. However, zoning and land use have historically been exclusionary, barring Angelenos from our communities based on race and on class. I'm curious what your strategy is to build inclusionary housing opportunities that encourage both affordable homeownership and rental opportunities. And where in CD5 would you build it?
Okay. I think we all agree that for decades, Los Angeles has failed to build enough affordable workforce housing. I think of my 4 kids and worry that they may not be able to live in the city. Housing costs are crushing families, including the most vulnerable among us. But simply put, the problem with building affordable housing is that no one can afford to build it in Los Angeles. We know that land, labor, material costs are at historic highs. But on top of that, for affordable housing projects, there is a complicated maze of funding sources, government agencies. This leads to millions of dollars being spent on lawyers and lobbyists and consultants on carrying costs, which ultimately drown projects. I serve as a board member of a nonprofit that's building housing for adults with special needs in the 5th district. It'll be the tallest, most dense project of its kind in our city. 64 units on Pico near Doheny, mixed use, ground floor retail for adults with special needs and developmental disabilities to live and work. It took us 3 years now to get our entitlements and go through plan check. There was no opposition. That makes no sense. These types of projects need to be prioritized, streamlined, and subsidized. And to do this, we got to do 3 things. We got to invest in preserving. So every affordable unit, RSO unit needs to be preserved. We have to acquire, which is something you've been leading on, council member, lower cost apartment buildings. And we got to build affordable housing projects throughout the 5th district. I've identified some places on La Cienega, on La Brea, on Sepulveda, on Cotner, where we can do this. It's including on city and county land. And then we got to do this in a very environmentally responsible way, which is near transit. So people can actually walk to work and walk to their job center. I'm committed to doing this.
Thank you.
Great. Molly?
Yes. So, I drive or when I ride my bike, I'm always looking at, space. Where is space for affordable housing? Also repurposing our buildings. That there's several in District 5 that can be repurposed for affordable housing. It's also more greener and more sustainable to repurpose buildings. And there are many open spaces to build, but yes, we don't have the political will, nor sometimes the neighborhoods then don't want these things. Not in my backyard, I can't. So I think the stigma of this affordable housing has to be changed somehow. And I believe how we do that is we bring community together. We have town halls, we have our leaders. I would go out and speak with people to bring
30.
people together so we agree, right, for the greater good of all. We cannot no longer have this idea of, oh, not in my backyard, I don't want this, it's affordable housing, when affordable housing actually looks beautiful. Also, hopefully it's green and regenerative. So that's what I would do. There's plenty of space. There's plenty of buildings to be repurposed. It's now a matter of political will and community agreeing upon that. So
Thank you.
together. Thank you.
Jimmy, go ahead.
Great. As much as I won't be in the pocket of developers when I win this race, I also won't be in the pocket of Republican HOAs who want to see no new housing development in Council District 5. I reject wholeheartedly that idea as exclusionary and not what Democrats stand for, and I hope not what CD5 stands for. I am proud of the housing stances I have taken in this race since day one. We need new housing in every neighborhood in Los Angeles. Council District 5 has seen almost no new housing development for the last 30 years, pushing most of that development into historic communities of color and spurring gentrification in East LA and Inglewood. Part of being a highly resourced, opportunity-rich area like Council District 5 is, with jobs aplenty, is that we need to bring people in as part of a collective project. That's part of civic life. And that's something we should be proud to stand for as residents of Council District 5. We need real investments in housing supply in terms of specific locations. I often think about the really underutilized commercial
30.
transit corridors in CD5, Westwood Boulevard, Pico, that have one layer of really underutilized commercial real estate, let alone could accommodate 4 to 5 stories of housing. Affordable housing is like winning the lottery. We cannot predicate our housing policy on a small handful of set-aside units that people are on years-long wait lists for. We need a housing ecosystem that isn't perpetuating such housing precarity for hundreds of thousands
Thank
of
you.
Americans, and we need to recognize the magnitude of the problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Scott?
Look, it's a moral imperative that we reverse decades of exclusionary zoning by building more housing in CD5. Look, I live in Carthay Square. I was lucky enough to move here this past summer, and we live in a rear front duplex. And we have the pleasure of a little backyard, which is something I never thought as a renter I would be able to have in CD5. It's not lost on me that you can't build a duplex like this anymore. And so we need to do a few things. One is we need to build more housing on our commercial corridors. The Transit-Oriented Communities Program has been successful largely in leveraging both market rate and below market rate units. It's actually the largest producer of below market rate units in our city right now. And we also need to be looking at bringing back missing middle housing into our neighborhoods. So these are the building types that are beloved in Los Angeles. The duplexes, the fourplexes, the bungalow courts, the courtyard apartments, they're functionally illegal right now because
30.
of parking requirements and zoning and other regulations, but they actually fit the character of a neighborhood very, very well. I would argue a fourplex in the same, like you see in the Fairfax district, could fit into the character of a neighborhood much better than the McMansions that we're seeing that offer ostentatious living for one family. So we have to have these robust conversations when we redo our community plans. And we need to be making important reforms like eliminating parking minimums to reduce
Thank you.
construction for housing.
Katie?
So we need more housing at price points that people who live in Los Angeles can actually afford. And we need to be building it near our job centers and transportation that people living in the housing will actually use. So in CD5, that means housing in Century City, Westwood Village, and near Cedars-Sinai. We have a huge jobs housing imbalance in this district, and we need to remedy that. And the way we're going to do that is by updating our community plans. As a former land use attorney, I have experience here. Our community plans are the documents that guide what our communities are going to look like. And I'm looking forward to leading that process in CD5. In exchange for increasing density, we must require additional affordable and workforce units as part of that. I'm committed to working with our county and state partners to bring funding to the 5th District to buy down affordability and otherwise mostly market rate projects, and then enforcing that affordability. I have experience doing this. And as Molly mentioned, adaptive reuse is less expensive than ground up construction. CD5 is largely built out, and so adaptive reuse has to be part of the puzzle. As a renter, I also strongly believe we need to work hard with our state partners to expand rent control to apply to all housing. Rent is folks' largest
30.
monthly expense largely, and everyone needs certainty in household budgeting with regards to such a big expense. Rent control creates stability for folks and is an equity issue. I also support stronger tenant protection, including a right to counsel and eviction proceedings. And I'm going to advocate for a large emergency grant fund to folks who are on the verge of losing their homes to eviction. Until we can get Section 8 fully funded at the federal level, we should consider doing something similar at the local level in partnership with the county and the state. Finally, we need to make sure we're preserving existing housing stock, especially rent-controlled units, because as Jimmy said, it's like winning the lottery, and we need as many of them as possible. Thank you.
Okay, next question is about the environment. We start with Molly here. This one's a little more open-ended than some of the others. LA has set ambitious LA Green New Deal goals and targets. I'd like to hear from you what you think that the primary barriers are to achieving them and what you will do to overcome them.
Thank you. So first of all, I think we need to move into clean and renewable by 2030, not 2035. We need to speed up the process. I think what the blocks are is, once again, special interest. We're pushing against, SoCal Gas and LADWP, and instead of unifying, we have labor people who are terrified of getting their jobs taken away. So there has to be a way that we come together. I keep saying this, we unify. When we have our separate ideas, it's fragmented. We don't get anything done. Unification is the key to moving forward. And I would do that. I've been doing that for years with my community organizing. I want to create green unions. And so people don't lose their jobs. They just go into clean energy jobs.
Birdie.
And then also, we have to get off of gas and oil, and we have to stop taking the money from special interests and the lobbyists and all the things. That's why we keep going into this gridlock. We have to get at the systemic issue and come together for the greater good. And I believe it can be done, but it has to be done with people who are willing. And that's where the leaders,
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Ingrid.
Jimmy.
Thanks so much for the question. To start, I think that corruption is a big piece of this. We've seen endemic corruption within the DWP, and it is a top priority for me to root out that corruption. I'm a newcomer to politics, and I think part of what you get with a newcomer to politics is an open-mindedness to root out traditional systems and traditional players who have a lot of influence in these systems. But aside from that, I think
nothing. I'm pulling some areas around Terry's house.
Mr. Vahedi, you're on speaker.
I apologize, Councilman.
Okay, reclaim my time, right? Okay. So yes, so the corruption piece is one. The second is the failure of pilot programs to take off. So DWP, despite the corruption, does have some really exciting pilot programs, two in particular that I think should be made universal. One is the transition from gas to electrical appliances in homes and subsidy programs for those. It's been massive. It's been a massive success, but it's only impacted a couple of thousand families. That should be rolled out across the city. It would do wonders to meet our LA 100 goals. Another program is the retrofitting of old buildings for climate resilience, that we've seen real success in DWP, weatherizing and bringing up to code so that there's not the same climate emissions from old homes. We know that it's a huge contributor to climate change. We need to scale up those climate programs to match the magnitude of this problem. Third is the piece that we've talked about routinely, which is this opposition to multimodal transit and denser housing. We're not talking at the root of the climate crisis if we're not talking about discouraging suburban sprawl and getting single occupancy vehicles off the road. For my money, those are the two greatest investments that we can make in LA's climate sustainability. And lastly, I would say is environmental racism. We've seen situation after situation, the Phillips 66 refinery in Wilmington, the oil spills in Long Beach, where given the population that's affected, it's always low-income communities that are bearing the brunt of environmental injustice. And that sheer racism is what's preventing a really robust climate response on some of these key pivotal incidents.
Scott?
So I appreciate the city council's goals around the Green New Deal and getting to 100% clean new energy. I think that the two barriers I see, Mike, are one is smart use of resources and two is politics. So in terms of smart use of resources, we've passed this goal, but we need to fund it. And that looks like weatherizing homes, that looks like new energy production and transmission. And if we're going to do that, we need to be laser focused on those solutions and remove funds from ridiculous things like freeway widening and new freeway production, which we know is climate arson. So we need to, at a regional scale, be very smart about our resources. The other thing I will say is politics, particularly the politics of urban design. So UC Berkeley's study shows that in nearly every zip code in CD5, infill housing is the most powerful way that you can reduce carbon emissions. The other piece, of course, is transportation, which is the largest emitting sector in our state. And so we need to build more housing and greener housing in CD5. And we need to build options for people to get around that are clean and green. I've been a leader on that issue.
Great. Katy?
So as an environmental policymaker, making LA a national climate leader is one of my priorities, and I have the experience and track record to continue making meaningful progress at the city. The roadblocks, though, as you note, are real. They're the same roadblocks we've been facing over at the county. They come from deeply entrenched oil and gas interests, certain sectors of the business community that depend upon the status quo, and some unions that are concerned about losing members' jobs. But I have a track record of working with these groups to make meaningful progress on climate. Measure W, the Safe Clean Water Program, the Clean Power Alliance. There's a lot of work we can do where process really matters, bringing people to the table early, iterating, giving people ownership of pieces of it. That's how you start to break down some of these walls. By bringing labor in early, we were able to get the building trades on board with Measure W. And we can do the same with transitioning to a greener economy. And we do it by creating jobs that are at least as good as the jobs that we're going to be losing. We also need to focus on building out our green infrastructure. So local renewable water infrastructure, transportation infrastructure, clean energy. And we have to do it in a way that creates good paying jobs along the way. We can't allow the oil and gas lobby to continue to pit workers, particularly brown and black workers, against environmental justice advocates in the communities that they represent. Often these are the same people who live in these communities, who are working at refineries. And I have experience doing this work. So I'm looking forward to doing this work at the county and at the city. And sort of the infrastructure nerd in me is particularly excited about the opportunities around DWP, Metro, AQMD. There's a lot of work we can be doing across all three entities to really move us in the right direction.
Sam.
I agree that every policy that we advance as policymakers should take into account how it affects the planet, right? And the planet we're going to leave our the next generation. And this is personal to me. I'm a father of a young child who has severe asthma, so every time he runs out there, he needs an inhaler, and that's because of Los Angeles continues to be one of the worst air qualities of any major city in the world. And City Hall and the county, frankly, have failed us on a lot of issues, but nothing is more infuriating or frankly dangerous than the failure to enforce our environmental laws. There's no execution, no follow-up, no accountability. One imminent threat that we face in Los Angeles is a failure to inspect and monitor the 50 and 60-year-old wells that are falling apart and are decrepit, that are pumping oil and gas under our homes. The 5th district has more oil and gas wells than any other district. There was just an oil spill this past December, a few months ago, and the LA Times has covered my leadership on this issue to make sure that we enforce our environmental laws and have an inspection ordinance that actually has teeth. Another threat is dangerous overdevelopment of our hillsides and Santa Monica Mountains in the 5th district, which pose a massive wildfire risk to the residents there and to our beautiful Santa Monica Mountains. That's another reason why I'm not taking money from developers, because I'm going to be accountable to the residents of the 5th district. Obviously, the big issues here are reducing vehicle miles traveled. I've done my part. I gave up my car 7 years ago and gone around with public transportation and other modes of transportation over the years. We have to accelerate our transition to electrification and good green jobs. Los Angeles needs to be a world leader on solar storage, on distribution, on charging. And that's really the kind of Los Angeles that we need to build together. And we have to get through, for some of the reasons we've discussed, get through the politics, bring people together, and implement the policies that our policymakers have developed and enforce our rules. We're not doing a good enough job. As a council member, protecting our environment and the health and safety of our residents will be my top priority.
Thanks. Before we go to closing statements, I want to ask one last question, a personal introspective one. Voters are just getting to know you.
Wait, excuse me one sec, Mike.
Yeah.
We're having a little issue here with the ballots. Because we went a little over, I'm going to resend the ballots, and 8 of you voted already. The rest did not vote because we were so in this, it was so long and wonderful and exciting that I didn't extend the time. You 8 will be allowed to re-vote. I'm sending a new one out in 1 minute, so we actually can do 2 more questions to give you all enough time to vote. I just hate for all of you not to have the chance to vote.
Okay,
So,
great.
okay.
So voters are just getting to know you. Your website, your stump speeches, your opening closing statements will tell them your basic bio and your work background and your history of civic involvement, the issues you want to stress. But I want to ask a question that I found one of the most interesting ones I got when I was first running. Please tell me about a time in your life when you got something wrong, when you made a mistake, when you botched it, and how you learned from it and how it made you better. And we already did 2 questions that started with Jimmy, so we'll start with Scott.
Oh gosh. I'm going first on the tough question. Such an interesting question, Mike, but I got to kind of think about this a little bit. Okay. A time I messed up and what I learned from it.
Scott, do you want me to go? I can.
Sure, Katie. I appreciate that. I appreciate the grace.
If that's helpful, I'm happy to do it. Is
All
that
let's
all right,
go, Katie.
Councilman?
Yeah, go for it. Go for it.
All right. So I went to UCLA for law school and had $100,000 of debt and did what most other people did coming out of law school do. I went to a firm. I went to Latham and Watkins because it seemed like what everyone was supposed to do. I always had done what I thought was the right thing to do, and this felt like what the mature, responsible thing to do. And I was a land use lawyer there for 4.5 years, and it became clear to me very quickly that it was not the right fit for me. I learned a lot there, but it wasn't what I wanted to be doing with my life. And it was right around the recession, the Great Recession. And I ended up staying a couple of years longer than I should have because I was afraid of moving towards the work that I knew I wanted to do, but I didn't know how I was going to do that. And eventually I resolved that I was going to quit. And I 2 days after the new year, beginning of 2010, in the middle of the recession, I did. And I sort of worked up the nerve, screwed up the courage, and went in and gave notice because I didn't want to turn 30 and still be in this job that I wasn't the right fit for me. And it was the best decision I ever made. It was also one of the hardest. It was clearly not the right fit for me. And I wish I could have my late 20s back again to be doing work that I was passionate about. But here I am now, 12 years later, finally doing that work, and did a choral fellowship, unpaid choral fellowship. And moved into nonprofit work. And so it was all good, but it was a couple of years of not doing what was right for me.
Okay. Sam?
My wife will tell you there's a bunch of mistakes, and I think she might be on watching as well. But it starts professionally. I've spent the last decade, last 16 years as a lawyer, litigating, fighting for my clients. Fighting for people who've been aggrieved, wage theft, discrimination. And sometimes you build up a case, you take it to trial, you believe every word of your client. You think that you can shift a jury or develop facts that will be helpful to you. And then sometimes things come out differently, and you need to pivot, and you have to acknowledge that this is not going to work out the way you hope, and make a difficult decision that you may have to settle or take a different approach. And sometimes I haven't done that because I believe in something. And I think that's where we are as a city right now. We built Prop Triple H it was so well intended, right? But it just has not been implemented well. And I respect the intention behind it, the hard work, but it's not working. We've only built 1,000 units after 6 years now. And over that period of time, 6,000 people experiencing homelessness have died. We all believed in it. We all supported it, but it's time to fix it. And I think strong, serious, honest leaders recognize when things aren't going the right way. We don't put up our blinders. We actually say, we have to do this a better way. And I think that we're on that place when it comes to public safety. I think we're there when it comes to housing issues, and also when it comes to labor, environmental relations. We need to have some strong, serious leadership to bring people together. I'm both a litigator, but also a mediator. I know how to bring people together around shared interests and get things done. And frankly, that's the type of humble, serious leadership we need at this moment, because we're in it together. We're in a mess of a city, but we're only going to get out of this if we work together.
Molly?
Yes, thank you for the question. I spent years of my life in a different industry that led me into a hedonistic lifestyle, so to speak. I got lost in it. It was the whole Hollywood scene, and I was acting and modeling and all of that, and lost my way. So I don't know if that's a mistake as much as being led down a path that really didn't resonate with truly who I am. But what I learned in that, and when I had my awakening, when I got sober, I knew the core value is to give and not take. The core value is to give and to be of service, as the program of AA teaches us. And I was taught as a kid. My parents were very philanthropic. I saw them with our church and all the giving, and I did that when I was a kid. I was protecting the eucalyptus trees around our house when I was 12, organizing protests. I helped build the bike lane, getting signatures, and then I lost my way. So I am grateful that I was brought back to my core values that I learned from my parents. And that is, you know, I work diligently to uphold my values. That's why I would never go back on my word, because I live a life now of principles that are very tied into, if I don't, my life could be very unmanageable. So I am here to serve. I uphold a moral standard, and I'm living a life. Now I've been sober and clean for 15 years, and that is all about being of service to others. So I'm here to continue to evolve.
Thank you, Molly.
Thank you.
Jimmy.
Congratulations to you, Molly. 15 years is quite the chip. I think about things I feel ashamed of or regretful of in my life, and they're nothing professional. It just doesn't register. It's always failures of empathy. And when I think about, and I've talked about this today a little bit, about my parents and my sister's very, very serious struggles with alcohol and opioid addiction, I was angry. I felt like my adolescence had been squandered by poor decision-making and selfishness. And I spent years mired in that anger and bitterness and resentment toward the family ecosystem for, that preoccupation. And I was off doing my own thing, and I just didn't have the time or energy to be compassionate or to be empathetic or to be a consistent and loving, confidant to them. And I feel horrible about it. I mean, I think that we want people so often to feel bad about themselves. We want them to feel ashamed. We want them to feel guilty. Something makes us feel better if they're feeling that way. And I think about that in policy as well, that no one makes their best decisions when they feel bad about themselves. People make their best decisions when they feel like they can change their lives and that they feel like their worlds can be made better. And I don't know if you all have substance users in your life, but that's been the story of my 20s and is a value I bring to this race.
Thank
and to
you.
my interpersonal relationships as well.
Thank you.
And Scott.
Okay, I appreciate the other candidates going first. Yeah, my example is personal in nature as well. In 2014, I battled cancer for a half a year, diffuse large B-cell lymphoma. And it was pretty scary, and I'm very lucky to be here and have the amazing care of the UCLA health system. I think my coping mechanism at the time was kind of like get into my hole a little bit, and also engage in my community work. And I think as a result, I didn't care for the people that were caring for me as much as I would like to. So I learned something about myself, and in the future, and since then, I've made more of an effort to make sure that I'm caring for the people closest to me, especially when I'm going through hard times. So that's one lesson
30.
That I learned, and try to apply in both my private and public life.
Thank you.
Okay, I see from the chat that there's some issues with the voting. Kara, should I go to the closing statements, or do you need me to ask another question to buy time?
You're muted.
If you can't talk, you can text me the answer.
Am I unmuted?
Now you're on mute.
Good.
Okay.
Now you're
sorry.
good.
Yeah, there are issues here with this election. I don't know what's happening, but everyone will get a chance to vote. The ballots have not gone out. I've done this many, many times. I don't know what's going on. I'm trying. You will all have a chance to vote. I promise you. If you voted in the first election, I know how many votes. I know who voted. They tell you who voted. They don't tell me how, but who. And so you will all get a chance to have your votes counted. I deeply apologize. I'm hoping to have this corrected. I've been fighting with it. Yes, please. Do you all mind? Do you mind staying on another few minutes, everyone? Okay.
I'm gonna have to jump off, Cara, in about 10 minutes, so.
Okay,
just-
no, it'll be done by then.
Same thing. About 10.
Okay, so we'll do
Promise
let's do a
you.
short question, then the closing statements.
Okay.
The short question, and we'll start with Katie on this one, is the Westwood Bike Lane. Are you going to get it done, or are you not going to get it done? I'll ask it quickly, and you can answer it quickly.
I'm going to get it done. I have experience working with community to do things like this. I've done this sort of work. I think we can create a win-win by working with the business owners and the community that lives around there. Parking is a concern. We can create a shared parking program. You know, a lot of businesses are open during the day, but not at night, and vice versa. So shared parking, transportation management organization work, I've created one. So we can create the bike lane, and we can lessen any sort of negative impacts associated with a loss of parking. It doesn't have to be.
Sam?
I'm gonna make it work. We need a bike lane to connect the Expo line to the Purple line. I'm the only candidate from Westwood. I've lived there virtually my entire life, and I've actually done the hard work of building bridges between different communities in Westwood. There's 2 neighborhood councils, believe it or not. And as a board member of the Westwood Library, I've been able to bridge differences between the two. I've gotten the only NPG grant from that to the library. And it was a partnership between the 2 neighborhood councils. And that's the type of leader we need, is that we'll bring people together on different perspectives. And I've worked with the BID, I've worked with the neighborhood leaders, I've worked with UCLA and the 2 neighborhood councils. And that's exactly what we need, is that type of person who understands Westwood. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do that in every corner of the 5th district.
Molly?
Thank you.
Yes, of course I will. I want to get the Westwood bike lane done. I'm a bike rider, as I've said, and I want safer, and not just get it done, but have a safe place for bike riders, that it's buffered from traffic, and it also doesn't take away or impede traffic, and where we have gridlock. I mean, people are taking, lanes away for cars, for bikes. I just believe we have to flow with traffic, but also keep our bike riders safe. There's all these great opportunities to do that, and I will get it done and have a safe place for bike riders, which will inspire more people to get on their bikes. Thank you.
Thanks.
Jimmy?
Yes, absolutely. Bikes work best for when 2 things happen. They are protected, ideally raised. Bike lanes that don't have some sort of barricade, we know from LA and from other cities that they're deeply underutilized. Bike lanes also work best when they're working in conjunction with changes to automobile transportation. So when you have reductions in speed limits so that people feel more comfortable biking, we haven't quite hit the sweet spot where people feel sufficiently safe that bike lanes are utilized at the capacity that they can be. That's partially a safety issue, and it's partially a network issue, that we sometimes have a bike lane to nowhere that doesn't connect to anywhere that you really want to go. So absolutely in conjunction with real changes in how we think about it in terms of safety and networks, the network nature of the bike network.
Scott?
Thank you.
Yes, 100%. Part of public safety is protecting folks from traffic violence, particularly folks who are vulnerable, like if they're on foot or on bike. And so 100% we should be doing this. It should have been done years ago. There were plans that didn't even take travel lanes out. Those plans would not be ideal. I do believe we need protected facilities, but our problem in Westwood Boulevard was one of political will and a lack of courage from our current council member. I've been a leader on similar road redesigns of 6th Street and Melrose Avenue, and I'll do it in Westwood Boulevard, and it'll be a wonderful thing for all users of the street, and I'll bring the community together to get it done.
Thank you.
All right, so that concludes the questions. Thank you all. Really, really great. Love to do it again. Let's now go
Okay.
to closing statements, and for that, we start with Sam.
Wait.
Oh.
I have to tell you, there is a real problem here. And with this ballot, I'm going to have to, I don't know how to fix this. I'm in with tech now. I don't know what it is. We've done all these elections. I can't correct this error. However, the ballot will go out to everyone who is at this meeting, who is a member in good standing for 45 days. The list is there. I do apologize because we want to know right now, of course. I can't help it. So I will send you the ballot. I will alert you all that the ballot is coming. You'll get it in your inbox. I don't think it's going to be sent before the end of this meeting, and I greatly apologize, but it will be sent today, and I will let you all know that it's on its way. That's all I can do. So I hope that's all right. I'm really sorry. I'm still working on it. I don't know what happened.
Thank you, Cara. Yeah, it always worked before. So
It's always worked, so I don't
Yeah.
know what's going
Yeah.
on. But
Or do you have any general idea of what the cutoff might be for the vote being allowed?
no, I can set it. I will set it.
Okay.
Believe me.
Include that in the body of the email, so we all got a sense of how fast we've got to respond. I don't want to.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's Putin. I think it's Putin.
I think it's Putin, right?
It's a dry run.
Yeah, I have to tell you, I am so impressed by all of you. It just makes me, all of you really need to be here in one capacity or another. I'm just blown away by some of you. Really, it's amazing to me. Anyway, let me go back to work.
All right. So
I'll
we'll
let
go to
y'all-
closing statements. If Cara, while they're doing closing statements, if someone could reply in the chat. Dave Zanizer from the LA Times has asked when and where will video be posted? And I can tell you from experience that Dave will keep asking you until you answer. So you may as well just answer. Not that I always do. So let's go now to closing statements, and we'll start with Sam.
Okay.
Perfect. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. Cara and Councilmember, thank you for convening and organizing this and moderating in such a thoughtful way. I love Los Angeles. I love it to my core. It's a city of endless possibilities. It enabled my refugee family to live the American dream. It's making it possible that potentially that I could be the first Iranian American, the first Middle Easterner, the first refugee, we believe, to be elected to any office in the history of the city. But for far too long, City Hall has not reflected the energy, the creativity, the integrity, and the diversity that define us as Angelenos. We've been electing the same career politicians, their staffers and their family members for years after year, and we're getting worse results for it. That's why I'm running a different type of campaign, one that puts communities and families first. That's why I'm not taking money from real estate developers and fossil fuel companies and PACs and special interests. That's why our grassroots campaign has earned the support of so many progressive champions like Supervisor Holly Mitchell, Congresswoman Ned Berrigan, Congressman Henry Waxman, labor and business groups, 1,300 leaders in the 5th district. And I'm sorry?
you have 30 seconds.
Oh, okay. And then just finally, on this issue that we really talked about, 4118, which is such an important policy we talked about, 4 of us are clear in our positions. But again, Katy doesn't seem to want to make clear what her position is. In prior forums, she's called it inhumane, ineffective, and she opposed it. But today she called it useful and that she would support in certain contexts. I think the residents and the voters of the 5th district deserve to understand where their candidates stand.
Thank you.
That's why we're all sick of the same political insiders not telling us where they are. We need real leadership and clear positions on the important matters before us.
Thank you.
Molly?
Yes, once again, I am Molly Basler. I am a progressive Democrat. I am here to serve the people, not the political machine. I too am not a career politician. I am here stepping in as a community organizer, as a leader who wants to lead the people, be an example to the people. I want to reach out to the people, have town halls, be accountable. I too, I'm not taking any money from special interests. I'm grassroots, people powered. I'm environmental, homelessness, affordable housing, small business coalitions, just helping everyone in the district, which, it's, the districts aren't in a bubble. So what we do in District 5 bleeds out into all of the districts. And I think it's really important that we cross over and take each other's hands and help each other. I am born and raised here. I am here to make changes and be courageous and not be beholden to special interests, because I'm not
30.
entrenched in the system. I'm not going to be beholden to anyone. I'm going to be for the people. And I think the people of LA deserve that, and that they are sick of being led down a lane by politicians and nothing being served up to them. And that's why most of them don't even vote in local elections. I mean, we have to be out there inspiring people also to change as we change, not just,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Jimmy.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a real pleasure. I love this club, and I believe that my values are your values, and I hope that I show you that today. Councilmember Bonin at the start of this gave you a set of criteria for evaluating candidates, and if I may, I'd like to add a couple more. The first is consistency in speaking across different audiences. There is so much pressure to change your messaging and to change your views depending on who you're talking to. It was astounding to me at the outset of this, and I didn't expect it. We are proud to have been consistent and sustained at every forum that we've been at. The second, and again, to Councilmember Bonin, I think the reason we all respect and admire him so much, and why the chat has been blowing up this whole time about with well wishes for him after retirement from City Council, is who is taking courageous stances in difficult settings routinely. It will never be as easy for us to say what we think than when we're running. The pressures only get greater when elected. So this period, it really matters
30.
for giving people an opportunity to see what you actually think and what you'll actually stand for when elected. We need to change to build an economy that works for everyone, and change can be tough, but it can also be beautiful and cathartic and inspiring. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And with me, we accelerate and catalyze the economic and social justice changes that we need to be an inclusive economy. We might not always agree, but I promise I will always listen and listen carefully and be an honest and consistent partner for you all in City Hall.
Thank you.
Thank you. Scott?
Thank you so much, West LA Democratic Club. And wow, it's so great to be with Councilmember Bonin. Look, I am the true progressive in this campaign. We have had our establishment politicians kick the can down the road on the systemic challenges in Los Angeles for decades around housing, around homelessness, around climate change and transportation. I'm a grassroots leader that's running a truly progressive campaign. That's why I'm endorsed by Abundant Housing LA, Ruin Democrats, some of the most progressive elected officials on the West Side, like Mayor Daniel Lee, Councilmember Alex Fish, Councilmember Yasmin Imani McMorrin, Councilmember Gleam Davis of Santa Monica. They know I am best equipped to make the changes we need in this city. And I have the skills to do it. I'm the only person in this field who has been elected to office in CD5 multiple times. I've run hundreds of public meetings.
30.
Built coalitions, responded to constituent concerns. And I really appreciate this opportunity. You can learn more about our campaign at scottforla.com. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you.
And Katy.
Thank you so much, Cara and Councilmember Bonin, for hosting us today, and to the West LA Dem Club for showing up. It's an honor. The first and last time a woman held this seat was in 1965, and there are only 3 women out of 15 on our council, one of the most progressive cities in the country. Our policies suffer as a result. I'm a feminist and a collaborator, and I'll bring an inclusive intersectional approach to the city council. I have a proven track record of creating, negotiating, and implementing impactful policies and programs that are already tangibly improving the lives of millions of Angelenos, and I will bring dedication to these goals with me to the city council. I'm the only candidate in this race who's ever worked in government and knows what it means to make policy, and I've learned from one of the best. Supervisor Kuehl has been an amazing mentor and friend, and she's deeply shaped how I'll approach this job. I understand that so many of the challenges we're facing are regional and intersectional: homelessness, public health, our economy, public safety. These are all complex regional challenges that require nuanced solutions regional solutions and having people who know how to work across jurisdictions and
30.
understand where the money is and how to effectively leverage it is going to be absolutely critical. I'm ready to go on day one. I know how to do this work because I've already been doing this work. I'm good at this work, and I'm ready to step in and lead, not just on behalf of Council District 5, but on behalf of all Angelinos to make LA more just and healthy. I would be deeply honored and grateful to have your support today and to partner with you to make our communities into what we know they need to become. Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent. And I believe that does it. I didn't miss anybody, did I? All right. Well,
Thank you.
thank you to all the candidates. That was phenomenal.
Oh, my gosh.
And let me turn it back to Kara. Thank you for asking me to do this.
Okay, whoa, well, okay. It's done. You're all of you members who are votable, your ballot should be there in your inbox immediately. And I've extended it by another 10 minutes just in case. I'll be checking every second to see how many have voted already. Mike, you also have a ballot because you've been a member forever, so you'll
Listen to
get.
what somebody wrote.
Alan,
We gotta go.
Alan, have you not gotten your ballot yet?
Yeah, I have not received my ballot.
All right, I will double check.
Good morning, Cara. Ty here. Unfortunately, I haven't received my ballot either. I apologize. I know how much hard work this is.
And you're all on the list. That's all right.
And this is Ruth Strauss, and I haven't received mine. Thanks. But it was a great, you put together a great program.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Kara,
I
So
have,
Cara, if we voted in the first round, we don't need to vote the second round.
You do need to vote in the second round. Yes.
Okay, let me look for my ballot because I couldn't find it. I was looking up.
Rick Tuttle, Cara, great meeting. I didn't get a ballot yet. I may not be eligible.
You're not eligible. You're not eligible. Ruth, you're not eligible.
Okay, well, I understand. Sure.
Yeah.
Kara, can I make a suggestion? How
Yes.
about everybody that did not get their ballot, just email you right now or vote?
Yeah.
Does that help you at all? Because this is horrible that this is happening for you.
You have no idea.
Hard.
But yeah, I'm not. What did you just say? You have no idea.
so I have to jump off. Thank you, everyone. And I'll just see who the votes when I get back from my other obligation.
If it helps folks, for people who may be getting multiple emails, mine came in at 12:48 p.m. So take a look around there in your inbox. I mean, it seems like that's about the time they were coming out the second round.
Yeah, and they're
by the elections.
yeah, and then you can tell they give you a thank you when you click on it. You'll see they say thank you what time it was submitted and all of that.
I'm going to run as well. Thank you, everyone. Great talking to you. Great conversation.
Okay, thank you all. I so
Thank you,
appreciate
everyone.
it.
Nice to
Thank you
see
very
all.
much.
Thanks, everybody. You were wonderful. My goodness, this is great. All right, so who has not? Ty, you have not gotten your ballot as of yet? And Alan Bale? I'm checking. Checking why not.
Cara, if you'd like to stop the recording, if it hasn't been stopped already, I don't think we need this stuff on the.
Oh, you're very right. Michelle, can you stop the recording, please? I'm on Voting Buddy right now.
Michelle, let me know when you got